Welcome to the last week of New York City Ballet's digital fall season. This is a week of new work. I'm Wendy Whelan, Associate Artistic Director of New York City Ballet, and we're so excited to have a premiere each night at 8 p.m. We have commissioned 5 choreographers that were each slated to make work for New York City Ballet this past year until COVID came and had us postpone them. So they'll all be back, but they've all gotten a chance to make a short video work with our dancers. First up is Sidra Bell, followed by Pam Tanowitz, Andrea Miller, Jamar Roberts, and Justin Peck. Tonight's piece is by Sidra Bell, and her music is written by her father, Dennis Bell. The musicians are players from the New York City Ballet, and the dancers in tonight's piece are Mira Nadon, Ghaleb Kayali, Emily Kikta, and Peter Walker. The direction of the film is by Ezra Hurwitz, and we hope you enjoy it. Please come back at the end of the piece for a brief interview with Sidra Bell and Mira Nadon. We hope you enjoy the performance. Welcome back. I'm Wendy Whelan, and I'm here with the choreographer Sidra Bell and dancer Mira Nadon to discuss this piece that we just saw. How was it to see the piece?
Momentous. It was such a privilege to be working with dance in this way, in landscape and on site. And the simultaneity of it all coming together was just astonishing to have the collaborative process unfold in an iconic space like Lincoln Center, and to see all the visioning come through.
Was it what you imagined it would be from the beginning?
It wasn't.
How did it evolve over time?
It wasn't. I mean, I did a visit of the site about a month before I started processing the material and imagined the relationship between the reclining figure and the dance and the structure of the body and space. What was amplified were the intersecting lines of the city in this film, and it sort of centered the body but also decentered in such a way that we could feel the entire city. And so that was really thrilling to see that reimagining of dance with my movement, which honors the anatomy, and then to see how that was in conversation with that space. So it was more than I could have imagined.
When I first saw a little rehearsal clip, I saw Mira, and I was pretty blown away. I had never really, I mean, I've seen you do different kinds of dance, but I haven't quite seen you do that spectrum of dance. And it looked like it fit you really well, but it also felt, I also felt a New York City Ballet vibe in it. When we first met, I asked you, have you seen New York City Ballet a lot in your life? And you said to me,
this is home.
Your mom is an usher here.
Yeah, my mom worked here as an usher, and my older sister used to crawl around, you know, on the floor in certain venues. And I went to the Alvin Ailey School growing up, which used to be on 61st Street, so walking through this plaza constantly. At the Dance Theater of Harlem, where I initially trained, they used to give us tickets to come see City Ballet, so it was definitely a full circle moment to have this process happen. And for me and my family, it was just a huge moment. Also being a choreographer in New York and just walking through the streets and with my dancers, and there was one moment where we actually did a rehearsal on the plaza because we didn't have studio space in the early days of my career. So
you're like, oh,
yeah,
the public,
right,
we can,
right next to the public library. So
wow.
Yeah, there are all these sort of memories that flooded through when this opportunity came, and it definitely feels like a full circle moment from my training to being a New Yorker to the history of my family in this city.
When did you start your connection with dance, and how did that begin?
I actually started learning dance through aerobic videos. And,
in the 80s?
In the 80s, Jane Fonda, yeah.
Really?
Yes. Very little, my mom and I used to just do them in the house, and that's how I started learning how to pattern my body.
Okay.
And she eventually put me into pre-ballet, Miss Patty Ann's in
Miss
Riverdale. And once she saw that that was how I languaged, I was a really reserved child, so she put me at the Dance Theater of Harlem when I was 7.5 years old, and I moved through that program into the pre-professional, professional division, and eventually decided I wanted to diversify into modern dance, and that's when I went to Ailey and studied Graham and Horton, and still continued with ballet. So it's just been my language.
I didn't know when I first met you, you know, your history. I heard about it through a lot of people, and I've heard about you for decades. You've had a company for 20 years.
Yes.
Your own company.
It's unbelievable.
And I'm wondering, when did you know that choreography was your thing, and when did you realize that you were a leader?
Well, there's so many different answers to that question. I think I really took stock of my space in dance during college. Okay. I decided to get a liberal arts degree rather than go to a conservatory, and because there wasn't an abundance of dance at Yale University, I had to forge out different pathways and collaborate. Cross-disciplinary. I founded an organization on campus, Alliance for Dance at Yale College, which still exists, I'm proud to say, and that organization brought workshop classes in, and I had all of my teachers that I studied with from like Gus Solomons Jr. and Kevin Wynn and Jacqueline Buglisi. I invited them to Yale to do workshops, and so I started to sort of look at the language of dance, the importance of communicating that to different communities that may not have been exposed to it. I also started choreographing in that time. So it was just, while there was no dance program, it was sort of a time to really figure out how to create space for it. And after that experience, a lot of my friends at school were like, you should continue, you should start a company. So it was really right away, age 22, back in New York, and saying, I want to start something. So the first performances were at, in Harlem at a community center, self-produced. My dad, who's a jazz musician, brought in live musicians, and I had immediately thought of it as sort of this experiential thing. So we had local artists having their artwork on the wall. It was in the round. So from the beginning, I sort of imagined that it would be this interdisciplinary experience and that it would also be parallel to education. So we were doing programs for young women in that community center on Saturday mornings, and that was how I got the space. And it was always this sort of twofold thing, education and making and collaboration.
You're an academic. You went to Spence, you went to Yale, you went to Purchase, and Mira also attends university and is a phenomenal young dancer with New York City Ballet. And back when I was dancing, that just wasn't normal to be a performer with a company and go to college at the same time. And I'm wondering, from both of your perspectives, what do you find changes when you add academia to artistry? What are the challenges, and where does it rise up together and create a new level of something else?
I was a history major, and I think most of what I took away from that experience of studying, and also through high school, you know, it was very much round table always. And the collaborative nature of dialogue and integration of ideas across disciplines was something that I really started to harness as I was an emerging choreographer, and then I was traveling into different community spaces and working with everything from ballet dancers to break dancers to people that were looking for more training, or actors. I really have worked with such a spectrum. And so the ability to open up language and to describe the body and imaginative vocabulary has really helped me sort of cross worlds and bridge the gap. And I think what I try to give my students is this, give them a voice, that they have agency in their work, and that we're participating together in this process. And I really found that with Mira immediately when we were in the space of creating the dance. Very grounded, very much a sponge for the information. I think that comes from a deep curiosity. Yeah, a space to want to know.
Yeah. Mira, what do you think?
I mean, I think that going to school and studying just brings balance to our lives, because it can be so easy to get stuck in that ballet bubble, and you're in the theater all day and you're working on your rehearsals and performing at night. So I think it's nice to be able to have something else to work a different part of your brain and to look back in history, like Sidra said, and just think about the world in different ways. I think it's also really nice, there are more and more dancers in the company that are going to school now that will all be in the dressing room, and half the people will be working on homework. So it's just like a nice community.
What were the challenges of doing this new kind of movement with Sidra, and especially between the two of you starting out on Zoom?
Well, like you said earlier, I think most of the rep I've done is more on the balletic classical side. So I wasn't really sure what to expect. And then with the added aspect of it being choreographed over Zoom, but I think it maybe had the potential to be confusing or maybe even a little chaotic, but Sidra was just very clear and just very thoughtful about the way she was teaching, and I think it was just a very smooth, seamless process. It was really fun and easy to pick up and fun to work on.
It was easy to pick up?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, when we started working, we weren't working to the music that we used in the finished piece, but I think the steps just flowed together in a natural way, and it did feel very organic, so it just worked.
I felt like I was seeing Mira 2.0, like another,
it was interesting to explore. I feel like there were so many interesting shapes that she created, and figuring out how to move from one shape to the next is maybe slightly different from how I normally move doing classical ballets.
Yeah.
So it was interesting.
I'm wondering, are you a musician as well?
No, I did a little studying.
Okay.
I feel like a musician in terms of just feeling music.
Yeah.
I often use music as not only to dance to, but atmospherically. And I feel like my dad, who created the music, he really captured, it felt like an entire piece, like it could have been several movements, even though it was just 6 minutes. And there were many different modalities within it, and so it gave me a lot of freedom, even though it was fairly short in time. There was mystery, there was accent, there was,
I felt a little Hitchcock in there.
Yeah, there's suspension.
Suspense.
There's suspension in it, and
Yeah.
I grew up with jazz from my dad, and also I love house music. I love classical. I sort of go all over the map in terms of what I listen to, and I like to have this sort of, when I'm in the studio, the music's always playing. I can't do anything without some sort of sound system in the work.
How was it to work with your dad? Did you describe to him what you wanted? Did you let him go free? Were you with him as he was creating it, sort of dictating?
No, we sort of do more of a siloed process.
Okay.
Because I find that the process is really, really different, actually, for a composer. And so I like to, as much as he would give me the freedom to create movement that's not necessarily synchronous, I also give him that permission. And then towards the end, I come in and give notes, and there are a couple of sort of pull-out moments, like thinking about silence and duration, or the suspension that we just talked about. So that's sort of where I come in terms of creating even more atmosphere with it. So he's very malleable in that way. But in terms of the initial processing, we tend to sort of work in a siloed way. Yeah, just to respect process and let him imagine as much as I would imagine in my studio practice.
I was wondering, what was it like to dance on the grass?
That was definitely an added challenge. So we were filming all over the plaza, and one of the locations was the grassy knoll. So it's sloped, it's muddy, it's a little bumpy. So I think it really just made me try to center myself and stay grounded, because obviously I'm not used to dancing on something that rigged.
Yeah.
Every time I looked at that hill for years, I was like, I want to see dance on that hill, or I want to see more people on that hill. So when I got to see a dancer on that, I was very satisfied. One of the first things I learned about you was I heard from Kyle Abraham, oh yeah, Sidra, she loves fashion. She loves fashion, and that's why I was very excited to bring you in for the fashion gala. So do you incorporate the outside and the inside? And
yeah, materiality from the beginning. I think in the beginning, as I was starting out as a choreographer, I was making things happen from nothing. And a lot of, so we were pulling clothes out of people's closets and rearranging them into sort of shapes, and working site specifically, thinking about how to use one light, if we had one light, to create this like drastic silhouette. So it was always a sort of very hands-on process for me with my dancers and whoever I was collaborating with. How can we create a theatrical statement with very little? And so as I've moved on and gained more resources, it's just still been a very important chord in the process that I'm sort of building these teams of people that can create worlds. So it's very much like world building. That's my favorite part about making a work, is that it's many voices in the space.
you guys collaborated pretty strongly. Did you feel that connection and that ability to bring your own sort of ways in?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so most of the choreographing, the phrases, was done over Zoom. And I think Sidra was very receptive to how we were feeling, and if a step wasn't working out how she thought it would, or we weren't able to execute it, we'd figure out how to make it work. And then once we got in the studio, we had some one-on-one time to really tailor it to each of our bodies. So I think we all started from the same phrases, and then they grew into different things for each person, which was really nice. So it did feel individual.
So Sidra, you had been commissioned for this year's Fall Fashion Gala for the big stage. It got postponed, but back in the end of last year, you were coming in, watching performances and watching class, and you were getting to know the dancers a bit. And what did you find and look for while you were in the studios with 100 dancers
It was
in point
fast.
shoes.
It was fast. I came a number of times because I like to really understand each dancer's process, and there were a lot of dancers to see. And so I came in about 5 or 6 times, also to some of the stage performances, and I was, looking for a sort of clarity, simplicity, risk-taking as I started to see them on stage, and also looking to see how the class work translated to stage. And I love watching teachers teach, and just to see how that information is passed, and that really helps me as a choreographer make decisions. The cast that I picked was really exciting, and so I'm looking forward to working with many of those dancers in the future.
I feel really grateful that you were able to get this little time in before your commission next fall. So that will be very exciting for us to have. It
was a little, a little alchemy of like a sort of sample of that cast, and I think that we got to know each other in a way that we may not have in a bigger sort of studio process. So I think this was a great workshop. I just loved my group for this piece. It was, there was something very intimate about working through the virtual space, working in our homes, and as I started to kind of build the ideas around costume and space, we were all part of that conversation. I had many mood boards that I sent people, and
I know you were so organized.
So it was so nice to see it all planned out.
Ready.
Because I really want to know. I really want to know what people think.
Yeah, no, it was really nice to be involved in that process.
Yeah.
Did you get all the information too along the way?
Yeah, basically. We were sent all the recordings of the music throughout the process and her mood boards for the costume, and then once we started planning out shots, we had access to all of that. So it was really nice.
It's nice to be like,
a
little huddle of like idea.
Yeah, I need that as a maker. I was telling my students this week, like, as much as I'm creating, I need you. I need the audience. I need this sort of reverberation of a conversation happening. So it was really important from the beginning that the dancers knew that they had agency in their performance of the material as well, and how they were embodying the material.
So you've had a history with New York City Ballet as a young toddler on this floor. When you are going to approach your next piece for the big stage with the proscenium, with point shoes, right?
Yes.
Ish. So how do you think you're going to approach that next level of creation?
Well, I feel so lucky with this process because it, like I said, gave me this intimate other look. It felt like side B in a way that I wouldn't have ever had the opportunity to create necessarily on planes in space. And so for the stage picture, I imagine the same kind of three-dimensionality that we get working on a site-specific piece, that I'd love for the entire experience of watching the work on stage to feel like, as an audience member, you're immersed in the world. So it's both a framework and a experience. And so, I got really excited when I was watching the performances in January. I started to imagine the scale, because this is a huge scale for me. I've been in big spaces before, but this is a different level of scale and live music. And so more than anything, I feel like exhilarated by the opportunity to imagine that kind of world building. And I think with the dancers, just knowing a little bit more about process together through this experience, I'm ready to challenge and to, invent, to create possibilities in the body working with point shoes, which I've had the opportunity to do a few times.
I know, I've seen a little.
I
was like,
and I love
did you
it.
work on point?
I love the speed.
Yeah.
I love the capacity to have these sort of arching moments in space. With modern dance, it's a lot of skin-to-skin work, but to have this sort of pressure of, comporting the body around space, and that kind of, again, it's when I've worked with point shoes before, it just takes on a different level of speed and scale. So super excited to research in point shoes.
Speed and scale, that's what we're about, ballet. Thank you guys so much. I'm so amazed and impressed with this beautiful work. I love what you've done together. I want to thank you all for coming and watching tonight's performance. Please come back every night. There will be a new premiere every night this week at 8 p.m. Next up is Pam Tanowitz, followed by Andrea Miller, followed by Jamar Roberts, followed by Justin Peck. It's a very New York celebration of dance, and we couldn't be more proud of our artists coming together and making work and creating in this time. So we hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope to see you back again. Thank you so much.